Hey, welcome to the Summit Host Hangout podcast, where you'll learn how to plan, strategize, and launch your profitable online summit. No influencer status necessary. I'm your host, Krista from Summit in a Box, and I'm probably far too excited to be recording the last episode of this roller coaster of a year, 2020. Looking back on the year itself is, of course, a whirlwind for all of us. But when I sat down to think specifically about 2020 as it pertains to virtual summits, I was actually kind of blown away at some of the things I've learned and realized. And even though I'm sitting here with over 100 episodes of this podcast recorded, I can't believe how much I'm still learning and how much I know I still have to experiment with and figure out. And I want to thank all of you listening for making that possible. If you're part of the Summit Host Hangout Facebook group and join our conversations in there, or if you're a Summit in a Box student and have shared your journey with me, I have to say that I learn from you just as much as you learn from me. So we are all in this together and kind of working together to figure out this summit hosting thing. But anyways, as I was looking back at what I learned this year, I decided that some of the things I realized are actually worth sharing. So today in episode 101, we will talk about 6 of the biggest things I learned about virtual summits over the past year. So let's start with one that just kind of pertains to the year as a whole and what I learned about hosting a summit around an election. So I warned everybody in June or July not to do it. If you're in the Summit Host Hangout, you can look back and you can see my video on that. But so many people were like, hey, I'm just going to see what happens, and did it anyway. So first, props to you guys. If that's you, props to you for doing things your way and not letting something that could happen stand in the way of growing your business. But I also know that a lot of summit results and probably just launch results as a whole suffered from it. People were distracted, speakers weren't promoting, conversion rates and sales were down, hosts were discouraged by the summit itself and just kind of the world. If that's you, know that it wasn't anything you did. The couple months leading up to the election were extra crazy because everyone, myself included, was trying to sneak in summits and other launches before the election hit. So that was just absolutely nuts. And then the weeks leading up to the election were filled with stress, anxiety, doubts, distractions. And as I'm recording this a couple weeks later, things still haven't quite evened out. And I'm still seeing the election have a part to play in things that are going on. So with that being said, in 2020, I learned that my suspicions around hosting summits close to elections were correct, and just don't do it. Even though this election was filled with more anxiety and drama than at least I remember others being, I think we'd see similar effects no matter what. So now we know something for us to keep in mind next time this rolls around. We'll see if we listen to our past selves when that happens. So now let's move on to some strategy for the second thing I learned. So after my third summit, which I hosted in April of 2019, I kind of had this realization that speaker selection for your summit was more important than I ever thought it was. And the way I figured this out was that my first summit made $16,000. My third summit then made $22,000. And while I was making those affiliate payouts, I was trying to figure out, okay, what's the difference between these two, levels of income? And then as I was making those payouts, I noticed, okay, I paid this speaker $3,000 in commissions and this one $100. What's the difference here? Why am I paying thousands more to some speakers than others? So what I did was sort my spreadsheet by who made the most affiliate income. And it was this huge aha moment. The people that I was paying over $1,000 all had the exact same audience as my summit. That summit I run for designers, all of those people specifically targeted designers. They didn't target creative entrepreneurs or anything like that. They had offers for designers. So that was an aha moment for me, but I didn't host another summit until a year later. So I wasn't able to test that theory until March of 2020, and I am still blown away by those results. So in my 2019 summit, I did not pay too much attention to my speakers' audiences. I chose them based on who I knew, who I felt okay pitching, and who had a topic that I wanted covered during the summit. But this year, I kind of ditched the comfort aspect. I pitched whoever I wanted to, and I prioritized topics and audience fit, meaning that 90% of my speakers had to have the exact same audience that my summit had. And holy smokes, did that pay off. That was the only major change I made this year, besides changing to a 2-tier all access pass model, which you can hear about in episode 60. But my number of registrations doubled and my sales tripled. I went from a $22,000 summit to a $60,000 summit. And that tells me that the right speakers mean everything. Nothing in my messaging changed. We reused all of our registration page copy, all of our ad copy, promo copy, everything stayed the same. It was the speakers that changed. So if you're having trouble finding speakers with the right audience, just let me tell you, it is worth it to struggle through figuring that out. If you have to postpone your summit for a couple weeks to do it the right way and spend more time digging for the right speakers, or maybe shifting what you're going to host your summit about, do that, because it is so worth it if you want these bigger results. So on to my next tip. This one is something that became apparent to me thanks to opening the doors to my Summit in a Box program and supporting students every day in our VIP Facebook group. So if you've hosted a summit, if you're in the process of doing so, you know that hosting a summit can get stressful at times. And if you're someone who's feeling stressed by the process, that pressure kind of builds and builds until you open the doors to registration and see what happens, see if it's going to pay off. And a lot of times things might start off slower than you expected, or they'll start off strong and then really quickly taper out for a week or two in the middle of the promotion period. And when I was seeing that happen for my students, they handled it in one of two ways. Either they wrote it out, they buckled down, they did everything in their power to push their results the way they wanted, and they just had faith in the process, or they kind of broke down. They got down on themselves, decided it wasn't going to work, thought about quitting, focused on the problem rather than looking for solutions, and just really got in a tough spot. I saw this several times. But for most of my VIP students who I am able to support on a daily basis, who took that second route and got down on themselves, I was able to say what I needed to kind of pull them out of it and get them focused on solutions and taking action. And when they did that, it paid off for most of them. But those of them who stayed in victim mode, kind of focusing on the problem, feeling sorry for themselves, feeling like they're doing something wrong, they didn't see the results they wanted. And that showed me just how powerful mindset is when it comes to hosting a summit. You have the choice every step of the way to either get down on yourself and focus on problems, or to notice a problem, know that it's there, and then dive into finding a way around it and working towards a solution. And I think you know which route I want you to take. As someone, though, who doesn't get into mindset work a whole lot, noticing this was definitely really eye-opening for me, and it's something I'll keep paying attention to and pointing out to people and see kind of how it continues to play into things as we move forward. So let's dive back into strategy for the next thing I learned here. So this year in September, I hosted my first summit that had a monetary goal of selling a course rather than raking in as much from all access pass sales as possible. So for my first 4 summits, it was all about the all access pass. And I've hosted summits ranging from about $3,000 in sales to $60,000 in sales just from the all access pass alone. But like I said, in September, I hosted a summit that was focused on selling my Summit in a Box program, which is the first time I did that through a summit. And doing that was so eye-opening for me to see the subtle, but at the same time, huge ways you might need to adjust your positioning to do that successfully. So when my co-host for that summit, Jen, and I were deciding on the positioning of the summit, I did not feel good about it because I knew that it wasn't going to bring in a lot of registrations and sales. A summit about summits for course creators. The audience was broad and overly marketed to, and we were only talking to people who already knew they wanted to host a summit, which was going to just make it so difficult, I knew. But even though I didn't feel good about it as far as registrations and sales went, I did think it was going to be a great fit for leading people into my program, and that hunch was right. So it was my smallest summit yet. Registrations wise, it brought in about 1,250 people, and it was the second smallest summit as far as all access pass sales go, bringing in about $15,000. And I think that was largely because of what we talked about before with speakers. So while we could find speakers who specifically targeted course creators, we didn't have anyone who taught course creators about summits. So speakers didn't promote a whole lot, and the people who did weren't as successful as they would have been, if they were able to be super targeted. But when it came time to present my program, that all paid off with my biggest course launch to date. So when you're thinking about your summit positioning, keep that in mind. You might find that there's a trade-off between the size of the summit itself and the results of whatever type of launch you do afterwards. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, it's very, very possible that some of you listening can have the best of both worlds and that you have an audience that will respond really well to like the registering and the All Access Pass as well as your program. But if you're not one of those people like me, know that the trade-offs are worth it. And that's okay. And it's still very worth it to move forward with an event. Just know which goal you're most focused on and narrow in on that. All right, we have 2 more to go here. So while a lot of people go into hosting summits for increased visibility and expert status, a lot of us, myself included, put a big focus on making an immediate income as well as generating leads. And it's really easy to get caught up in that. And this year, I was reminded over and over of the insanely powerful benefits beyond those things. So specifically, things like the ongoing trust you build with your attendees and speakers and what that will mean for you moving forward. Things like the connections you make with your speakers and how that will continue to pay off with collaborations down the road. And then the ongoing monetary benefits for your business that both of those things bring. And one of my really good friends gave me an example from her summit that comes to mind whenever I see someone disappointed that they didn't make bank with their summit. She was a first-time summit host with absolutely no audience and no income from her business. None. She hadn't made anything yet, had not sold anything yet. She hosted a summit as a way to put herself on the map, and she broke even with the event. I don't remember exact numbers, but I think she made a couple $1,000s. I know she brought in about 500 attendees. And when I heard about her results, I was a little bummed because through her summit, I had come to just love her, love what she was all about, and I wanted more for her. But then she started telling me about the other benefits. She now had 500 people she could email on a regular basis with her offers and to learn more about. She had started from zero. She made connections with her speakers that have led to podcast interviews, guest expert trainings, all kinds of clients. And also the fact that as of recording this, every single one of her clients in her now 5-figure per month business came from that summit in one way. And that includes myself. I didn't know her when I agreed to speak, other than knowing that a mutual friend just raved about her and that she was a student in Summit in a Box. And during the summit, I decided I kind of wanted to learn more about her, see what she was all about, and support her since she was a student. So I tuned into a live video she did in her summit's Facebook group, and I was blown away and instantly was like, she's amazing. I want more of what she's all about. Since then, since her summit earlier this year, I have paid her $10,000 in services and digital products and things like that. And I am just one person that discovered her through her summit. Like, how freaking powerful is that? So if you find yourself caught up in worrying about All Access Pass revenue and leads, take some time to think about what other ways this will pay off for you down the road. All right? Because this is a powerful strategy and it's so much more than leads and sales. All right, the last thing I want to talk about are strategies that work. And what I want to say about this is that there is no single strategy that's best for everyone. I run a product with hundreds of students at this point called Summit in a Box. It is my version of a profitable summit, and I will say that it's very effective, but it's not the only way. And a few months ago, you would have heard me bashing paid events. In our Facebook group, you would have seen me say, hey, no, do not do paid events. And I will still say that to some people. But then one of my friends went and ran a paid event that led to over $100,000 in group program sales after the fact. So while the summit itself was smaller, because of the pay upfront aspect that turned some people off, the results were definitely not smaller. That's not going to work for everyone though. And I'm going to bring her on the podcast soon to talk about who she thinks paid events will and won't work for. But just know that if you want to do something a certain way, and you hear people saying, the other way is the way to do it, listen to everyone's experiences. And I say experiences, not just opinions. Put very little weight on something someone thinks without having experienced themselves. But then make the best decision for you and see what happens. It's all an experiment. You can always try something new next time if you go in with the mindset that, hey, I'm going to see if this works. And if it doesn't, we'll try the other way next time. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I could go on for forever about different takeaways I've had this year, but these were the 6 that have stuck out the most to me. A little strategy, a little mindset, but all so important. So I want to say thank you so much for tuning in. For show notes and resources mentioned in this episode, head to summithosthangout.com/101. Before you go, remember to check out my free masterclass covering the 3-part framework to triple your monthly revenue with the virtual summit while building your list for free. In this class, we cover the secret to creating a plan you can actually follow to make your summit happen, even if you're already too busy, how to host a profitable event and land expert speakers without a huge audience of your own, and how to use a 3-part profitable summit system to triple your monthly revenue and the size of your email list. And you can join that class at summithosthangout.com/class. Now go out and take action to plan, strategize, and launch your profitable online summit.